Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is visiting Africa for the first time since assuming office. And even before he set foot on the continent, he began to attack America's only other competitor, China. Now, China has a lot of investment in Africa, being heavily invested in infrastructure development. In fact, the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where Mr. Tillerson began his Africa tour, was built by China. Here's how he described the sort of relationship the country has with Africa.
The United States pursues sustainable growth that bolsters institutions, strengthens the rule of law, and builds the capacity of African countries to stand on their own 2 feet. We partner with African countries by incentivizing good governance to meet long-term security and development goals. This stands in stark contrast to China's approach, which encourages dependency, using opaque contracts, predatory loan practices, and corrupt deals that mire nations in debt and undercut their sovereignty, denying them their long-term self-sustaining growth. Chinese investment does have the potential to address Africa's infrastructure gap, but its approach has led to mounting debt and few, if any, jobs in most countries. When coupled with the political and fiscal pressure, this endangers Africa's natural resources and its long-term economic political stability. We welcome other countries' involvement in the development of Africa. In fact, it is needed. That's what the free market is all about, competition leading to more opportunities. But we want to see responsible development and transparent free market practices that foster greater political stability on the continent. We hope China will join us in this effort as well.
The world being a global village that it is, Mr. Tillerson has called on African nations to apply concrete diplomatic and economic pressure on North Korea in order to achieve denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula.
I reiterate our desire for more African nations to apply concrete diplomatic and economic pressure on North Korea. The goal of the Global Maximum Pressure Campaign, which has been supported by multiple UN Security Council resolutions, is to motivate North Korea to achieve the complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. African nations can contribute to this goal, and we need country by country for nations to take action to support this international effort towards a denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Tillerson's visit takes him to Kenya, where he called on the government not to stifle the media and threaten the courts. Remember, the Kenyan government shut down 3 TV channels in January as the stations plan to live stream opposition leader Raila Odinga taking a symbolic presidential oath before the government defied a court order to switch them back on.
We believe that there are actions that need to be taken in Kenya, and that they need to correct certain actions like shutting down TV stations and threatening the independence of the courts. I know Kenya takes these matters seriously. A free and independent media is essential to safeguarding democracy and giving all Kenyans confidence in their government.
Then there's Djibouti, Chad, and Nigeria. Ahead of his visit here, I spoke to one of our U.S. political analysts, Curtis Zadigba, on what impact his visit would have on the countries visited and on Nigeria-U.S. relations. What do you make of the timing, considering what's going on in the U.S. government at the moment, resignations and scandals?
Well, most importantly for the American government right now is the threat from China. And you could say that the movement of Tillerson is very strategic. First of all, he starts from Ethiopia. Ethiopia is where the Chinese have the greatest investment in Africa.
Yeah, and they're the ones that built the AU headquarters.
Yes, so they need to counter that because when Trump came in and started talking about America first, he ceded a very important continent like Africa to the Chinese. And you see Xi Jinping moving so fast, knowing that, Africa is strategic in terms of the global economy and in terms of diplomacy that will be required for the future. Then from Ethiopia, he moves to Djibouti. Why is he in Djibouti? Djibouti is where the United States have their military station in Africa. Yeah. And a few miles down the road, the Chinese also have their military. So he needs to go there and counter the moves by the Chinese. Then he moves from there to Kenya. Kenya, of course, again, you see a lot of Chinese investment pouring into Kenya, and then you have the Al-Shabaab. So they need Kenya to counter the Al-Shabaab, an arm of the ISIS. And from there, he moves to Chad, the same proposition, security, and then to Nigeria, because a very large and big population. So it is strategic that Tillerson is here, because the U.S. is afraid that the resurgent power like China is moving too fast in Africa.
Yeah, but isn't that a fault of the United States?
It is.
China has such a strong foothold in Africa, because the U.S. tends to base its own foreign relations on its interests. Yes. China also has interests, but I think they see more potential in Africa than the U.S. does.
Yeah, look, it has not always been so. With previous presidents of the United States, they have seen Africa as a good hunting ground for strategic reasons. Look at George Bush, for instance, who started PEPFAR. Yeah. The program that deals with AIDS.
Malaria and AIDS.
Look at AGOA. The African Growth Opportunity Act that was meant to encourage Africans, to access American market. And look at Power Africa by Obama, which was meant to bridge the gap in electricity supply for Africa. In 2014, Obama had, a conference with African leaders in Washington.
Yeah, the U.S.-Africa Summit.
U.S.-African Summit. And all that. So there's always been this robust relationship between Africa and the United States. Well, President Trump in the White House, he says it's America first. And again, you see what is going on, in the sense that, look, African leaders are finding it difficult, even to relate with the U.S., given what he has said about Africa, that the African nation, is a shithole. He doesn't want immigrants from Africa. He says the migration policy that brings family together, he calls it chain migration, and that there's a need to stop that.
And that's like, staring at himself in the mirror, because his wife, the First Lady Melania Trump's parents, did come in through chain migration.
He also his mother is from Scotland, his father is from Germany. They also brought a lot of people from Germany and Scotland into the United States of America. So these are the things he's saying, look, that is why we still don't have an agreement on DACA. DACA, of course, is Deferred Action on Childhood Arrival. Children who were taken to America by their parents, and he is saying that, look, until he gets concession from the Democrats on building the wall and on abolishing the chain migration and the visa lottery, he's not going to cut any deal.